Hello, how you guys doing? James here. I hope you're having a warm one, having a warm night or warm afternoon or whenever you see this video. Um, I've been hanging out and looking at some of these videos from different channels, and you know, you've probably been noticing I've been doing a lot on black people, and maybe this is to my non-subscriber. This is to my subscribers and non-subscribers on why do I keep showing these videos about black people. Because right now it's a big narrative, is a negativity on black people. And you need to understand, some people, they see things, but they try to have selective memory and selective attitude, and they shut it down, and they don't want to hear about it. They want to be one side, one track, and try to be want someone to be a people pleaser. Well, it's nothing wrong with getting along with somebody, but sometimes truth got to be told and got to be revealed. But in this video, I'm gonna start. I've been start from spiritually, and I gotta walk. And I'm just gonna take a segment of each video, and I'm gonna show you what I'm trying. Anybody who can have a spiritual eyes to see what I'm doing is trying. I'm encouraging the people that we have been put down to see that this is something that's in you that the other some people of different nationalities don't respect. And maybe they might get educated along the way. So that's why I made this video. So let's start with the spiritual aspect of it, and we'll go into the how it's connected and how we see each other. Let's start with show a little bit of shout out to Dark Bible Stories.
Genesis to Revelation, there is a pattern that most churches will not teach you. A pattern that places African peoples, specifically named and specifically called, at the center of God's redemptive plan. If you have ever felt like an outsider in your own faith, if you have ever wondered why the heroes in your Sunday school pictures never looked like you, if you have ever questioned whether God really sees you, then what you are about to discover will change everything. Because you are not an afterthought. You are not a footnote. You are named in prophecy. In the next hour, I am going to show you 7 distinct prophecies from the Old and New Testament that specifically mention Cush, Ethiopia, and the descendants of Ham in end-time contexts. We are going straight to the Hebrew. We are going to examine what ancient rabbis said about these passages. We are going to look at what early church fathers knew and what archaeological evidence confirms. This is not conspiracy theory. This is not Afrocentric theology trying to rewrite history. This is documented biblical truth that has been sitting in your Bible the entire time. You will see why the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts chapter 8 was not a random convert, but the fulfillment of ancient prophecy beginning to unfold. You will understand why Zephaniah, a prophet of Cushite descent himself, delivered specific end-time visions about his own people. You will discover what the Psalms reveal about who gets registered as citizens of Zion when God writes down the names of nations. And you will learn why entire chapters of Isaiah are dedicated to the land beyond the rivers of Cush. These are not vague metaphors. These are specific geographic locations, specific ethnic groups, specific promises that most biblical scholarship acknowledges, but most pulpits never preach. Here is what I need you to understand before we go any further. Everything we are about to examine comes from the Bible itself, from recognized scholars, from historical records that anyone can verify. I am going to cite chapter and verse for every major claim. I I am going to show you what the original Hebrew words mean, not what English translations made them sound like. I am going to let Scripture speak for itself. And if this challenges what you were taught, good. Truth does not fear questions. If the Bible is truly the Word of God, then it can handle being examined closely. In fact, it demands to be examined closely. By the time we finish, you will see a pattern emerge that spans thousands of years. A pattern that connects ancient prophecy to modern fulfillment, happening right now in our lifetime. African Christianity is exploding, while European Christianity declines. The African diaspora is reconnecting across continents. Knowledge that was stripped from your ancestors during slavery is being recovered and reclaimed. And if Psalm 68 verse 31 is true, if Ethiopia is indeed stretching out her hands to God in these last days, then we might be watching biblical prophecy fulfill itself in real time. That means you are not just learning history, you are discovering your destiny. So let me ask you something. Are you ready to see what they did not teach you in Sunday school? Are you ready to discover that your ancestors were not accidents, that your heritage is written into the fabric of Scripture, that God has called you by name for such a time as this? Then stay with me. Turn off distractions. Focus. Because what you are about to hear will shatter the narrative you were given and restore the truth that was stolen. Let's go to the Word. We start where the prophecy itself starts, in the book of Psalms written by King David. Psalm 68 is a powerful chapter about God's triumph, His majesty, His victories over enemies. And right in the middle of this prophetic psalm, David writes something stunning in verse 31. Princes shall come out of Egypt. Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God. Now before you spiritualize this away, before you say it just means all nations generically, look at what the text actually says. It names specific places. Egypt, Ethiopia. These are real geographic locations with real people groups. The Hebrew word translated as Ethiopia is Cush. That is the name of one of the sons of Ham, whose descendants settled in the region south of Egypt throughout the African continent. Every biblical scholar agrees on this. Cush refers to African peoples. There is no debate about that. The debate is about what this prophecy means and when it gets fulfilled. And here is where it gets interesting. Ancient Jewish interpreters, the Targum, which is the Aramaic translation used in synagogues, renders this verse as the children of Cush shall run to stretch out their hands in prayer to God. They saw this as an active future event, not a past event, not a general statement, a specific future moment when the Cushites, the Ethiopians, the African descendants, would turn to God in prayer. But it gets even more specific. Rabbi Jarki, one of the most respected Jewish commentators in history, wrote about this verse in connection with the Messiah. He said, when the King Messiah shall arise, they shall bring gifts to thee out of Ethiopia. Do you see what just happened? A traditional Jewish rabbi with no agenda to promote African peoples connected Psalm 68 verse 31 directly to the Messianic age and the end times. He saw in this verse a specific role for Ethiopians in the final chapter of God's plan. This was not a black theologian trying to insert his people into Scripture. This was a Jewish scholar reading the Hebrew text and concluding that Cush has a prophetic purpose. Now look at the timing. The verse says, Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands. The Hebrew word for soon implies urgency, a set appointed time, not some vague, distant future. In prophetic language, soon means when the time is right, when the season arrives, it will happen swiftly. And
this is going to be kind of a long video, so bear with me. It's going to go past what my usual time is, but those of you who have the patience, and I appreciate you hanging around to see that what I'm putting together. That's why kind of my videos kind of long. I've been kind of shortening them, but this is some good stuff. But this is let's go to this.
It creates the perfect blend of sun.
As I speak, I'm going to ask the white Americans in the room to please repeat after me. of myself and on behalf of my country. To you and all African Americans, from the beginning of our nation's history, in honor of your ancestors and on behalf of your children, please hear this from my heart. I apologize. Please forgive us. With this prayer, I acknowledge the depth of the evils that have been perpetrated against Black people. From slavery to lynchings to white supremacist laws.
Ever since the opening of one of the oldest vaults in history, the world has since then spiraled into a buzzing sphere of resounding shock. The old blinkers on the eyes of plenty of people around the globe have fallen off their eyes in a flash, and they can now see the structure of lies which they have been made to hold on to with their lives and their belief system for so long, without any doubts or consternation whatsoever. But the news is not yet over. There is yet more shocker in the way. You're advised to brace yourself for what you're about to hear.
Stop what you're doing, download this video, and share it on every social media site you can find, because this shit just got crazy. Vladimir Putin just told his entire nation that they now serve Black Jesus.
Ladies and gentlemen, people of Russia, today, сегодня, we stand on the precipice of a monumental revelation. A moment that redefines not only our understanding of history, but also the path forward for our great nation. In an extraordinary discovery hidden beneath centuries of lore and legend, we have opened what can only be described as the oldest vault known to mankind. What we found within its ancient confines challenges the very fabric of our beliefs and heralds a new dawn for our country. These figures, preserved against the sands of time, reveal a truth that is as profound as it is transformative. As your president, I see this moment not as a challenge to our beliefs, but as an opportunity to embrace a wider, more inclusive understanding of our history and spirituality. From this day forward, let us proclaim our nation under the guidance of Black Jesus.
This is before AI, so nobody can say this was AI.
So many talks, turbulent reactions, outragings, and all kinds of activities in relation to the recent unveiling of black biblical icons to the world by the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, hasn't died down just yet. As a matter of fact, the commotion continues steadily on the rise.
You remember that yesterday I gave you a video about one Dr. Kihuran Kuba, who is a Ugandan scholar specializing in classical African history. He spoke and said that one thing that the white person did when they colonized Africa is that they also colonized information. And that really shows that much of the information that we were fed was whitewashed and made to align with the the desires that the white person had at that time.
Including Jesus. So a lot of these biblical paintings and images were destroyed during the Renaissance time. There were museums that were able to preserve these images. One of them was in Russia. So Putin recently decided that he was going to open the vault and expose all of the images. A lot of people are surprised that the images are of darker complexion people. Well, archaeologists and painters from all around the world have come together to confirm that the paint on these biblical images or paintings is the original paint, and it is not lighter paint that has oxidized over time. And a lot of people are in question of this because of the images that have been and are currently being depicted of biblical figures, which does not align with the ancient images.
Just the thought alone that a white man opened up the vault and let everyone see this, but people are still mad. Why would you be mad? You should be happy. Remember, this is chess, not checkers. Putin did this because 2024, the black Anunnaki is about to return and their time is up. So they was thinking, hey, if we could get some black people on our side, maybe the Anunnaki.
You can really see that Russia has been holding a lot of important information for the world. And I guess this is why some of the Western nations do not find any common ground that they can share with Russia. Because Russia is out to liberate the world. It is out there to share true information, because true liberation can only come when we have true and factual information.
News of the unveiling has been a great shocker to the entire globe, as the display of these black biblical icons in their unrivaled authenticity did not only challenge long-held mistruths and wrong beliefs which has been adopted for centuries now, but it did shake down the very firmly forged roots of religious falsehoods, which obviously has been conspiratorially championed for as long as any one of us can remember today. It's only been days now, the 23rd of this month of March, 2024, since the Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed the nation in Moscow. In a resounding video, the passionate president has been shown sitting at a table and opening a triptych. Here, a narrator had said,
"Today, Jews or Christians actually took their faiths."
Okay. Now, how is this connected?
Did you know that not all Black Americans trace their ancestry solely to Africa? Schools often teach a version of history that begins with ships and slavery, with ancestors taken from African homelands and brought to America in chains. But buried beneath that narrative is something else, something older. Many Black families have passed down quiet stories for generations, stories about native roots, about ancestors who were here long before Columbus. These aren't myths, they're clues. Clues to a deeper truth that's been pushed aside or deliberately erased. In this video, we uncover the hidden legacy of Native Black Americans and why it changes everything we thought we knew about where we come from. Without further ado, let's begin. For centuries, the identity of Black Americans has been framed almost entirely as descendants of African slaves. While millions of Africans were forcibly brought to America, that is not the full story. Early American history and family traditions suggest a more complex ancestry for many African Americans. Since the colonial era, countless Black families have passed down oral histories about a Native American forebear. Some mention a Cherokee great-grandmother, others remember a Cree grandfather, or speak of Indian blood somewhere in the lineage. These stories were often dismissed as fantasy or confusion, but today they are being taken seriously through both historical records and genetic research. The idea that Black people have Native American roots is not new. It is a truth quietly carried through generations. Take genealogist Michael Lane Jr., for example. He grew up hearing that his family had indigenous heritage. The version of history taught in school never quite matched what he felt inside. In his words, the history he learned did not reflect his true heritage. He instinctively believed that some of his ancestors were not just from Africa, but were also native to the Americas. Over time, he confirmed those old family stories. Many African American households have similar memories that have survived, despite being excluded from official narratives. DNA research has started to validate what these families have long known. One major study showed that more than 5% of Black Americans tested had at least 2% Native American ancestry. This suggests a Native ancestor within the last few generations. Many others carry smaller percentages that point to more distant indigenous roots. What this means is clear. Millions of Black Americans today likely have Native ancestry somewhere in their lineage. These findings match what community historians and independent genealogists have been saying for years. The lives of African Americans and Native peoples did not develop in isolation from one another. From the very start of colonial life, their histories intertwined. Recognizing this heritage disrupts the overly simple idea that Black identity comes from Africa alone. This does not take away from the suffering and resilience of African ancestors. Instead, it adds depth to the story. Understanding that some Black Americans descend from Native peoples reframes their identity as deeply connected to the land itself. These ancestors were not only survivors of the Middle Passage, some were already here. They were the original caretakers of the land, now called the United States. This dual ancestry becomes a source of strength. It offers Black Americans another set of stories to hold on to. Those of warriors, healers, farmers, and leaders who walked this land long before European ships ever arrived. As we move forward, we will explore how these connections formed, how they were erased, and how they are being rediscovered today. This history was hidden for a reason. But once it is revealed, it cannot be forgotten. The connection between African and indigenous peoples in America began much earlier than most of us were taught. In fact, Africans arrived in the Americas at nearly the same time as Europeans. Some evidence even suggests their presence before them. Spanish records show that by 1526, decades before Jamestown was founded, enslaved Africans had already landed in what is now the United States. They were brought by a Spanish expedition to the Carolina coast. From the very beginning of European colonization, people of African descent and Native Americans were thrust into a world disrupted by foreign powers. Their lives collided, often in violent circumstances, but also through shared survival and unexpected alliances. As European colonizers moved through the Americas during the 1500s and 1600s, they brought African slaves with them while also confronting the vast networks of indigenous nations. Colonizers tried to pit the two groups against each other, but in many cases, Africans and Native Americans formed alliances of their own. There are accounts from the 1700s that show deep cooperation between the two. During Pontiac's War in 1753, a Detroit resident observed something striking. Native warriors rising up against British settlers were reported to spare Black people and only target white colonists. He wrote that the natives were saving and caressing all the Negroes they encountered instead of harming them. Stories like this terrified slaveholders. They feared what might happen if Native Americans and enslaved Africans joined forces. Their worst fear became real in many places. Indigenous communities often sheltered escaped slaves, offering them safety when no one else would. The Iroquois leader Joseph Brant, for instance, welcomed runaway slaves into his Mohawk community and even encouraged marriage between the two groups. These villages became places of protection, and over time, many served as quiet stops on what would later become the Underground Railroad. Before the Civil War ever began, Native peoples were already offering refuge, forming family ties, and helping Black men and women flee from slavery.
Diabetes? It's complicated.
Crime. And in this case, you're writing not only about African Americans, but about low-income people generally. In the United States, murder rates, rates of infection with venereal diseases, and rates of teenage pregnancies were among the social pathologies whose steep declines were suddenly reversed in the 1960s.
African Americans are 20% more likely, according to the Office of Health and Human Services, 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems than the general population.
The American legal system is, by design, by its very nature, by its results, it is racist. This is not happenstance. This is not someone's negligence. We didn't stumble into this. But it was always designed to marginalize a certain group of people.
Broken family structures, mental health problems, high incarceration rate. Are these issues slowly making the Black community crumble? For so long we've been subjected to the stereotype of the rebellious Black race, incapable of order. While we can say that the stereotype is indeed just a stereotype, we unfortunately cannot deny that some of our brothers and sisters have been morally struggling, but with due reason. a deeply rooted challenge stemming from the challenges we've had to endure throughout history. In a world seemingly against us, we must demonstrate toughness to avoid harm. But what if some of these tough behaviors are the very factors that actually dampen our well-being? It's an unfortunate cycle we need to be aware of, not only for ourselves but also for our brethren. Join us today as we go over the major factors contributing to the black struggle. Before we start, we ask if you could give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. Your support encourages us to keep making insightful content. And with that, let's begin. Let's start by addressing the problems regarding the broken family structure of many of us in the black community. They say learning starts with the family, but what if a child's family isn't complete? Many may say that it is okay, as it does indeed depend on how the child is raised and guided, but one can't deny that it does not always turn out well for all children.
She has never been married and is raising her daughter without a man's help. She's not unusual. Today, nearly 60% of all black children are born out of wedlock. Timothy said his children are not his responsibility. He has left them to be supported by their mothers and welfare.
With that being said, what are the possible outcomes of a family without a father? Fatherlessness refers to the absence of a father figure in a child's life, often due to factors such as divorce, incarceration, or abandonment. Between 1970 and 2022, the percentage of black children residing in single-parent households with their mothers rose from 29.5%.
Really what we've seen is what used to be more of a middle market financing land.
9.5% to 45.6%. The sad thing is, this breakdown of the family structure within the black community has deep historical roots, including the legacy of slavery, which often separated families. In modern times, research has also consistently shown that children growing up in father-absent homes are at a higher risk for various negative outcomes, including lower academic achievement, higher rates of delinquency and crime, increased likelihood of substance abuse, and poorer mental health outcomes. This is because without a positive male role model in the household, there is a chance that children may struggle to develop a sense of identity, self-esteem, and social skills. To further expand on this topic, research suggests that children from father-absent homes tend to have lower academic achievement compared to those from two-parent households. This disparity may be attributed to factors such as reduced parental involvement, lack of academic support and guidance, and increased instability within the household. Without a father figure to provide encouragement, structure, and role modeling, children may struggle academically and have lower educational attainment levels. Children growing up without a father in the home are also at a higher risk of engaging in bad behaviors and exhibiting conduct problems. Without a positive male role model to provide discipline, guidance, and supervision, children may be more susceptible to peer influences and involvement in risky behaviors and activities. The absence of a father figure may also contribute to feelings of abandonment and anger, which can manifest in behavioral issues. A great example of this is the 9-year-old rapper called Lil RT. At a young age, he was stripped of his innocence and childhood.
But this 6 to 9-year-old is allowed to have his video stay up. There's nothing wrong with the video that you're about to see from Lil RT. Take a listen. The lyrics that came from this song as being performed by Little RT, the maybe 6, maybe 9-year-old, so to understand that he is basically talking about a presumably random woman who can't hang out with him unless she's willing to perform fellatio. This is a 9-year-old. I want to be clear, as this is being debated on the internet right now, this completely saddens me. It is the destruction of black culture. It is the destruction, therefore, of American culture, and this is what we are starting to see. His mother is promoting him on Instagram. If you think that there's a problem with this, if you think that this content should be pulled down, I do, then there's something wrong with you and you're jealous. This is a kid, and I hate to say this because we've seen so many instances of this in the media, who will end up dead, okay? He is holding dollar bills, talking about killing people. If you think that his mother is setting him on the right path, then it's because you're an idiot, okay? You're an idiot who contributes nothing to our society. And yes, some people have realized that. Here are some other comments that have appeared under this video. Y'all shouldn't be promoting this at all. There is nothing funny about it, says one person. Another person says his parents failed him. A third person says it's sad that kids can't be kids anymore. And all of those people are correct. Now, if you're thinking, shouldn't he be in school? You would be right. Because there's this video on his Instagram page. Take a listen. So they're laughing. He obviously has taken a piece of paper. He attempts to read it and says, "What the F does this say? I'm only 9." Which is to suggest, obviously, that he can't read, so he needs somebody to come read that. People are giggling and laughing. It's not funny. If you are, in fact, 9 years old, not only should you be able to read, you should be able to read chapter books, okay? You should be in the 4th grade. And the 4th grade is when I began reading Harry Potter. If you can't read a piece of paper when you are 9 years old, then your mother has failed you, the school system has failed you, this country has failed you, and you have no chance. And it's not because of you. It's honestly not this kid's fault, which is why I'm not going to sit here and make fun of him. It has everything to do with his surroundings and the crisis that I am talking about in this country.
It goes without saying that being in a broken family without a father does not always go well for the upbringing of black kids.
You see what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, I try to tell little bro, I try to help little bro as much as I can, but I'm not his father.
But why is fatherlessness such a common thing in the community? Let's figure out together the possible reason why.
But don't you think you might need help in raising that baby from a man?
Not really. I didn't have a father. My father wasn't in the home, so, it really, male figures are not substantially important in the family.
Many black women have chosen to raise their children alone for various reasons. Black women who grew up without a father have a higher chance of choosing to build a family without one. This reason can be traced back from the time where black families were separated from each other in history, as mentioned above. Also, black individuals and families often face lower wages nowadays compared to their white counterparts, even when equipped with adequate qualifications such as education and experience. This wage gap can make it challenging for them to afford basic necessities and maintain a decent standard of living. Low wages can also contribute to financial stress and strain within households, which may lead to conflicts and instability. This trend was further enforced when welfare policies were enacted.
It's really sad. Really sad. But all is not lost. Because
to just take a moment to say to you that I really don't think you fully understand what has happened to these people that you look at as second class or inferior citizens in this nation. Black people who were brought to this country were stripped of their names, language, culture, religion, God, and taken totally away from the history of themselves. Here are 30 million people who don't wear their own names. They wear your names. Who don't speak their own language. They speak English, which is not their language. They never were allowed their own cultural expression of Africa. Don't you realize that when you turn a people upside down and inside out, then sell them not for a day, not for a year, but for 300 years and deny us the human right to know, to read a book, to learn, to understand. And then after 300 years of that, you allow us into the church, but by that time you've painted Jesus white, God white, the angels white, and then all these black people have been subjected to a form of white supremacy, which produces in the reverse a black inferiority. And this is fulfilling what Jesus said, as a man thinketh, so is he. And as long as our people think the way they people should do to correct our condition.
Blacks were programmed to obey. The inferiority of the black man and woman, sadly, was planted, as one would a seed, sowed to the ground, programmed. And after having their mindset established on the programming, staying in line became, in a matter of time, a habit, a nature, serving the programmer. This could happen to any mammal with a behavioral pattern. Only in this case, it is a singular race, a particular specimen of people, the blacks. And it has been so for centuries.
We as black people have to provide a future for our people, for the government, and white people are not providing a future for us. So it is wrong for us to stay around laying at the foot of white people like the Bible's Lazarus, begging for crumbs that fall from their table when we can go and make a table of our own. But a welfare mentality was created when my fathers and mothers were made slaves and robbed of the knowledge of themselves and dependent totally on a slave master for food, clothing, and shelter. So that when we were so-called set free by the 13th Amendment, we didn't have the mentality of a free people to go and do for ourselves. So we turned right back around and volunteered our services for not free labor, but so close to free labor.
Racism, a consciousness of extremities, an organismal dysfunction, could make the racist go any length to prove his superiority over another. In this mentality, dominance is the goal, not nobility. There is no nobility in a war. The racist lives like one fighting a war. And in a war, conquest is the only goal, and this comprises acts that are far from noble, as everything brute and savage is what happens in a war. For more than 2,000 years, people in many different parts of the world have forced their fellow humans into slavery. Only the inhumanity particularly decided against the African people stands out for all time. Between about 1500 and 1900, Europeans forcibly uprooted millions of people from throughout West Africa and West Central Africa and shipped them across the Atlantic in conditions of great cruelty. Traders set out from European ports towards Africa's west coast. There they bought people in exchange for goods and loaded them into the ships. The voyage across the Atlantic, known as the Middle Passage, generally took 6 to 8 weeks. Once in the Americas, those Africans who had survived the journey were offloaded for sale and put to work as enslaved labor. To refer to the Africans who were enslaved only as slaves strips them of their identity. They were, for instance, farmers, merchants, priests, soldiers, goldsmiths and musicians. They were husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, sons and daughters. They could have been Yoruba, Igbo, Akan, Congolese, Africans, from all over the African continent.
If you can't quit the P word, I want to let you...
So, this is deep, ain't it? Yep. Now I'm gonna give you a little bit of this.
August 21st, 1831, Southampton County, Virginia. 10:00 p.m. A black preacher named Nathaniel Turner stood at the edge of a tobacco field under a moonless sky. His hands trembled as he gripped a hatchet. Sweat poured down his face, despite the cool night air. Behind him stood 6 men, former slaves like him, brothers in bondage, warriors in waiting. They had gathered here at Cabin Pond hours earlier, eating roasted pork, drinking apple brandy, planning something that would shake the foundations of American slavery forever. Nat Turner had been seeing visions since he was a child. Visions of blood on corn leaves. Visions of black and white men fighting in the fields. Visions of a great purpose ordained by God himself. And then it happened. February 12th, 1831. A solar eclipse turned day into night. The sun disappeared behind the moon. Darkness covered Southampton County in the middle of the afternoon. While other slaves panicked and prayed, Nat Turner fell to his knees. His eyes closed, his heart pounding like thunder. And he heard the voice, clear as a bell, strong as lightning, unmistakable as truth itself. The Spirit spoke, "Rise and prepare yourself. Fight against the serpent. Slay my enemies with their own weapons." 6 months later, here he stood. The moment had arrived. God had given the command. Now came the reckoning. What happened in the next 48 hours would claim 60 white lives. But what they did in response would murder over 200 innocent black people. Men, women, children, slaughtered without trial, without mercy, without justice. And for 194 years they tried to bury this story. They called Nat Turner a madman, a murderer, a monster. But they never told you he was a preacher who heard God's voice. They never told you he could read and write when it was illegal for black people to learn. They never told you he was described by everyone who knew him as intelligent, gentle, and deeply spiritual. They never told you that after his rebellion, Virginia passed laws banning black people from preaching, reading, gathering, or worshiping without white supervision. They never told you that these laws stayed on the books until 1865. 34 years of legal terror designed to keep black people in mental and spiritual chains. They never told you that Nat Turner's rebellion directly inspired the abolitionist movement and planted the seeds that grew into the Civil War. They erased him from textbooks, deleted him from history, turned him into a villain instead of what he truly was. A warrior, a prophet, a man who heard God and obeyed no matter the cost. This is your stolen history. This is the truth they buried, because they feared what would happen if you knew it. And today, that silence ends. By the end of this video, you will discover truths that will change everything you thought you knew about American history. You will learn how a black preacher named Nat Turner led the largest and most successful slave revolt in United States history. You will see the exact evidence of how over 200 innocent black people were massacred in revenge, and how the state of Virginia refused to even acknowledge it. You will read the actual laws they passed to ban black literacy, black preaching, and black freedom of assembly. Laws that existed in your grandparents' lifetime, but more than that, you will understand why this story matters right now in 2025. Why the wealth gap exists. Why black neighborhoods were systematically destroyed. Why your family rents instead of owns. Why mass incarceration targets black men at rates that mirror slavery itself. This is not ancient history gathering dust in old books. This is your life, your family, your stolen inheritance. Your ancestors lived through this terror. Your grandparents survived the aftermath. And you are living with the consequences right now today in December 2025. After this video, you will never see Christian faith the same way. You will understand why white supremacy fears black spiritual awakening. You will recognize the pattern that repeats throughout American history. Every single time black people rise, they change the rules. And you will know deep in your bones that your poverty is not your fault. Your struggle is not your failure. Your pain is not your weakness. It was stolen. Every dollar, every acre, every opportunity, every dream, stolen by a system that has spent 400 years taking everything you build and calling it progress. But here is what they could never steal. Your spirit, your truth, your divine purpose. God preserved your ancestors through the Middle Passage for a reason. God brought them through 246 years of slavery for a reason. God kept them alive through Jim Crow, through lynching, through redlining, through mass incarceration for a reason. And that reason is this, so that you could be here right now, learning the truth they tried to bury. So that you could reclaim what was stolen. So that you could finish what Nat Turner started. Not with violence, not with revenge, but with truth, with justice, with the unstoppable power of a people who finally know who they really are. Let me show you. October 2nd, 1800, Southampton County, Virginia. A baby boy was born into slavery on Benjamin Turner's plantation. His mother, Nancy, was an enslaved woman. His father's identity remains unclear to this day, though some historians believe he may have been a white man. What we know for certain is this. From the moment he entered this world, Nathaniel Turner was different. Extraordinary, even. The enslaved community noticed it first. When Nat was just 3 or 4 years old, he began describing events that happened before he was born. Events he could not possibly have known about. He described conversations, situations, details that only adults who had lived through them would remember. The older enslaved people looked at him with wonder and whispered among themselves, "This child has a gift. This child is special. This child has been touched by something beyond this world." Even white people noticed. Benjamin Turner himself remarked that young Nat had too much sense to be raised as a slave. He said that if Nat was kept in bondage, he would never be of any use to anyone because his intelligence would make him rebel. That observation turned out to be prophetic. Unlike most enslaved children, Nat Turner learned to read and write. This was extremely rare. In the early 1800s, teaching enslaved people to read was not yet illegal in Virginia, though it was heavily discouraged. But somehow, young Nat gained access to books, to the Bible especially. He consumed scripture like a man starving for truth. He memorized verses. He studied the Old Testament stories of Moses leading his people out of bondage, of David slaying Goliath, of Samson destroying the temple of his oppressors, even at the cost of his own life. The words sank deep into his spirit. As Nat grew older, he became skilled with his hands. He learned carpentry. He learned blacksmithing. He worked as a field hand when required. But his true calling was something else entirely. He became a preacher. In the slave quarters, in hidden clearings, in the woods, in the dark hours before dawn, Nat Turner preached the gospel to his fellow enslaved people. He spoke of deliverance, of freedom, of a God who heard the cries of the oppressed and who would not allow injustice to stand forever. People called him the prophet. Because Nat Turner did not just preach, he saw visions. It started in the early 1820s when he was in his 20s. He would be working in the fields when suddenly the world around him would shift. The physical realm would peel back like a curtain, and he would see into the spiritual dimension. He saw hieroglyphics written in blood on corn leaves. He saw black and white men engaged in brutal combat across the tobacco fields. He saw the number 69 and other figures alongside drops of blood scattered across the crops. He looked up at the sky and saw the sun darkened, the moon dripping blood. These were not dreams. These were visions. Waking revelations that came to him again and again throughout the 1820s. At least 10 distinct prophetic experiences that he recorded and shared with those closest to him. Nat believed with absolute certainty that God was using the natural world as a canvas, that the Creator was painting signs and omens specifically for him, that he had been chosen for a great purpose. In 1821, something happened that tested his faith. Nat ran away from the plantation. He fled into the woods and survived on his own for 30 days. Freedom was within his grasp. He could have kept running, could have tried to make it north to Pennsylvania or New York, where slavery was illegal. But after 1 month, Nat Turner returned. He walked back to the plantation voluntarily. The other enslaved people thought he had lost his mind. Why would anyone return to bondage when they had tasted freedom? Why would anyone walk back into chains? Nat's answer was simple. The Spirit told me to return. I received a sign from God. My purpose is here. My mission is not yet complete. That response tells you everything you need to know about Nathaniel Turner. He was not motivated by personal freedom alone. He was not driven by individual escape. He was compelled by something far greater, something divine, something that required him to stay and prepare for a mission that would cost him his life. For the next 10 years, Nat Turner waited. He preached. He prayed. He watched the skies for signs. He listened for the voice of God. And in February of 1831, the sign came. February 12th, 1831, Southampton County, Virginia. Midday. The sun began to disappear. Slaves working in the tobacco fields stopped their labor and looked up. The moon was passing directly in front of the sun, a total solar eclipse. Day turned into night in the middle of the afternoon. Stars became visible. Birds stopped singing. An eerie silence fell across the plantation. Most people were terrified. Eclipses were considered omens, signs of coming disaster. In slave communities, people fell to their knees and prayed for mercy. But Nat Turner did not pray for mercy. He prayed for clarity, because he knew, deep in his spirit, he knew. This was the sign he had been waiting for his entire life. The sun turned dark, just as he had seen in his visions years earlier. The heavens themselves were speaking. God was giving the command. As the eclipse passed and the sun returned, Nat Turner stood up from his knees, with absolute certainty burning in his chest. The time had come. The Spirit had spoken to him clearly. This is the sign. Now is the time. Rise and prepare yourself. Slay my enemies with their own weapons. Nat began to plan. He shared his revelation with a small group of trusted men. 4 at first. Men he knew would not betray him. Men who also believed that God was calling them to action. Their names were Hark Travis, Henry Porter, Nelson Williams, and Sam Francis. In secret meetings deep in the woods far from the eyes and ears of white overseers, these 5 men discussed the unthinkable. They talked about killing their enslavers, about liberating other slaves from nearby plantations, about seizing weapons from the armory in the town of Jerusalem, Virginia, about sparking a revolution that would spread across the South and finally break the chains of bondage. They set a date, July 4th of 1831, Independence Day. The bitter irony was intentional. But when July 4th arrived, Nat Turner fell ill. The plan had to be postponed. For weeks, Nat recovered. The other men grew anxious. Had they missed their moment? Had God withdrawn his blessing? Then came the second sign. August 13th, 1831. The sun appeared in the sky with a strange greenish-blue tint. Atmospheric conditions created an optical phenomenon that turned the daylight an unnatural color. People throughout Virginia reported it. Newspapers documented it. Nat Turner saw it and knew immediately. God was speaking again. He gathered his core group. The date was set August 21st, 1831. 1 week away. On that afternoon, they would meet at Cabin Pond, a secluded spot on the Travis plantation. They would finalize their plans. They would share a final meal together, and then under cover of darkness, they would strike. August 21st, 1831. 3:00 p.m. Cabin Pond, Southampton County, Virginia. Nat Turner arrived at the meeting site and found 6 men waiting for him. Not 4. 6. 2 others had joined Jack Reese and Will Francis. Will Francis was particularly significant. He was not a slave. He was a free black man. He had his freedom. He could have stayed out of this. But when he heard about the plan, he volunteered. He chose to risk his life for the liberation of people he did not even know. That tells you something about the spirit of resistance that burned in the hearts of black men in 1831. Nat Turner sat apart from the group at first. He perched on a log some distance away watching them. He was praying, meditating, preparing his mind and spirit for what was about to happen. This was the moment that would define his entire existence. Everything he had seen, everything he had heard, everything God had told him. It all came down to this night. At 4:00 p.m., Nat joined the group. They roasted a pig over a fire. They drank apple brandy. They ate together in fellowship, knowing it might be their last meal as free men. They discussed the plan in detail. First, they would go to the home of Joseph Travis Nat's current enslaver. They would kill Travis and his family. This was necessary, they believed, to prevent alarm from being raised. They would take weapons from the house. Then they would move from plantation to plantation throughout the night, killing white families and liberating enslaved people, growing their numbers with each stop. The goal was to reach Jerusalem, Virginia by morning. The town had an armory with weapons. If they could seize it, they could arm themselves properly and hold the...
Wow. I didn't want to make this too long, but Jerusalem, Virginia. Who Jerusalem in the Middle East is. See the connection? I didn't want to go too deep into that, but yeah, this video is called Black America Chronicles. You can watch the rest of the video. I didn't want to get too much, but this goes to show you what we've been through as a people. And from the beginning to the end, it all connects together. And this is the reason why there's the side of the Hebraic side that the brothers and sisters are coming. They what you call your Hebrew Israelites. You know what they call these Hebrews, which they really are. If they have, but they trace back beyond the before time. I believe that's what it was, and I believe maybe some have believed took the names of what the Most High have given them. But spiritually, it always starts. And that's the thing. And so now, this new way of thinking, the heathens want you to think their way. And some of black people fall into the heathen way. But according to this video and many videos, this should show what America blacks have been through. And that from the spiritual side of the Bible to how it connects in the scriptures. And even though what was the problems with the family, what started the problems, everything has to be accounted for. And they're still trying to divide black people. Spiritual. But first thing they do, they can take everything away from you, your history, out of museums, close down certain holidays, but they can't take your spirit away. That's what this administration can't do. And whatever they strip and they put back those enslavers, the monuments again, if Trump chooses to do that, then the judgment on the land will consist. It's not going to go the way he thinks it's going to go. And he chooses to overlook it. So you can never erase this out of history, because the descendants will keep spread from generation after generation. And that's one thing, it'll never go away until justice is made right, reparations is made right. Not just saying that it's just be the past, because it's not over. That's the truth. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's light. Shout out to all the content creators, Dark Bible Chronicles, Black Culture, and check out their channels. We are the people that's coming. Maybe as society they try to put you in the background as the trees and the scenery as black people, but the Most High is bringing us forward. This is what they don't understand. He's changing the demographic, starting with his word. Now you can see how it comes out of his word when you read the word. Take care, be blessed. See you on the next video.